Hey there, my name's Justin. I'm one of the pastors at Hope City. I'm really glad you're checking out this week's message. I hope you'll take a minute, look around our website, visit our YouTube channel, and download the Hope City app by searching Hope City Indy in the App Store or Google Play Store. There's great content on the app that goes far beyond weekend services. Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. No matter where you come from today spiritually, I hope this message helps you find hope and move closer to Jesus. Enjoy the message.
It's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on the newspaper page. And love and tradition of the grand design, some people say, is even harder to find. Well, then there must be some magic clue inside these gentle walls. 'Cause all I see is a tower of dreams, real love bursting out of every scene. It's the bigger love of the family.
How awesome is that? Yeah. Hey, welcome to Hope City. Hopefully you enjoyed that as a child of the 90s. Actually, I'm a child of the 80s, but who cares? As much as I did. If you're a guest with us today, so glad you found us our very first week of a 10 a.m. service, and we're excited to be here together. My name is Justin, one of the pastors here, and excited to dive into this Family Matters series with you. One of the things we say around here all the time is that Hope City is a place where you can belong before you believe. And so if this is your first time here, we hope that you feel welcome and we hope that you feel at home. We kick off this new series today. And for those of you that know me, know my wife, you know how much family means to us. We have 5 kids in really all kinds of stages of life. We have a 25-year-old married son. We have a 22-year-old married son. We have an 18-year-old senior in high school. Then we have an 8th grader. And we have a 6th grader. And so we're in middle school all the way up to no grandkids, thank the Lord. But anyway, we're all the way up to married kids. And family matters so much to me. 10 years ago, 10 years into my marriage, 16 years ago, I made some really destructive choices in my life personally and in my marriage that almost cost me my family. And so since that time, I have this heightened sense of awareness of the importance of family and how much family does matter. And Trish and I made some really significant changes in our marriage and some changes in our family to be more intentional in our relationship and to be more intentional in our family, because family took on a greater meaning back in that season. And so that's kind of how we live our life now. Back in June, our son Elijah and his wife Julia, they moved to Portland, Oregon. And it was a big move for them. I feel like it was a bigger move for Trish and I. It was just this part of our heart that it felt like it died at the time because they're 1,900 miles away, and we have all of our kids are close or in our house. And so to have them so far away, it was just this adjustment of what does our family look like now, and how can we build a relationship with he and his wife when they're so far away. And so Trish and I kind of made this strategic decision that like every other month we're going to try to figure out a way to be with them and see them. And so back in August, she went out to Portland for a few days, and then this week I went out to Portland for a few days. And it was just such an incredible time. We went to the Nike headquarters, of course. We went and ate at a bunch of different Portland restaurants, and it was just we kind of yelped our way through the city over those few days. And then we went to the the Trailblazers game, but they played the Pacers. It was like this epic thing. And so Elijah had his Damian Lillard jersey on, and he was rooting for his new home team, and I'm rooting for the Pacers. And we're 14 rows from the floor, and there's like no Pacers fan there. I'm like, yeah! And we lost by 4. But anyway, but it was just such an incredible time, and it was really cool because Elijah and I are wired a lot alike. He has Trish's temperament, but he has my personality, and so we had a really challenging relationship for his last few years of high school and even the first few years of college. And to see how God has restored that relationship, family is one of the ways that God makes us more like Jesus. And there were some significant changes that I needed to make as a dad and how I related to Elijah that I needed God's help with. And I needed God to transform my heart in order to do. And so I got home last night about 1 a.m, so I don't even know what city I'm in, what state I'm in right now. I'm in a state of tired. I know that. I'm grateful for the extra hour of sleep. But it was just this rejuvenating time because, in order to have a healthy family, you have to be willing to love deeply, and you have to be willing to make changes. And if you're not willing to forgive freely and listen intentionally, then you're not going to have a healthy family. And there are times of celebration in families, and there are times of heartache and hurt and disappointment and struggle. But the healthiest families, this is what I've learned over the last several years, they have honest conversations about those things. And they strive not necessarily to be perfect, but to grow together. One of the things we started doing as a family several years ago is we started these things called family meetings. And sometimes family meetings take place for fun things, like, hey, we're going to decide where we go out to eat. Or family meetings take place for big things, like, hey, we're going to decide where we go on vacation this year. Sometimes family meetings take place for hard things. Hey, we need to have a family meeting, we're going to be moving. Hey, we need to have a family meeting, we really need to, help mom out with the house. Hey, we need to have a family meeting, we're getting a little out of control in how we're talking to one another. Like, there's different types of family meetings, but one of the strategic things that we've done as a family is every December, we have a family meeting, and we block out 2 to 3 hours, and we go through different goals that we had over the past year and how we did on those goals, and then we dream and set goals for the future. And we talk about, academic goals, and we talk about relational goals, and we talk about vacation goals, and we talk about financial goals for Trish and myself. And we talk about big dreams, and we evaluate how God showed up or how we didn't come through on different goals that we had the previous year, and we look ahead to the next year. But these conversations, they're built around authenticity, they're built around honesty, and they're built around grace. And because our family matters, we're willing to talk honestly about family matters. So over the next few weeks, we're diving into this series called Family Matters, and it's really a play on words because it's not about family, it's about generosity. It's about how God longs to grow us as a family, both individually and collectively, in the area of generosity. What does generosity look like personally, and what does generosity look like for us as a church family? One of the core values of Hope City is radical generosity. In order for generosity to be radical, it has to matter to us individually, right? And so what does that look like? And so my goal over the next few weeks is that I want the goal of this series to be that we grow as a family in our generosity. And if you've been around Hope City for any length of time, a few years ago, we introduced these axioms, these ways of describing different stages of generosity to help us visualize and kind of put ourselves on a continuum on where we are in the generosity process. Because generosity is not a one-time event. Generosity is it's a posture of our heart. And some of us are predisposed for generosity, right? My wife is predisposed for generosity. I am not. And so God has used her over the last 26 years to refine me and to grow me in that area of my life. And so we have not talked about, because of COVID and because of a lot of different circumstances that we've all lived through over the last 18 months, from March of 2020 to like October of 2020, I won't say that we were flying by the seat of our pants, but we had never gone through a pandemic before. And so our teaching calendar and the way that we did message preparation and message planning, it kind of went out the window, and we said, hey, let's teach through the Bible of what people are actually struggling with and not just go with our conceived ideas of what our teaching calendar looks like. And so we have not talked about generosity in 2 years. It's 2 years ago this month that we last talked about generosity at Hope City. But in order to do that, we have these different categories of givers that we've talked about. And so if you aren't familiar with these, I'll recap them for you. The first kind of category, the first stage of generosity is what we call a rookie giver. And a rookie giver is exactly what it sounds like. It's a person who is giving for the first time. And the question that a rookie giver asks before they give is, do I like this place enough to give? Do I like this place enough to be generous? Right? And so you might come to Hope City or you go to a different church and you're sitting there and you're evaluating everything about the church. We've said this before, that people decide whether they go back to a church in the first 7 minutes of being on a campus. Okay, and so it takes 18 months typically for a person to decide to give financially. The average American goes to a church for 18 months before they give financially. And so because of the pandemic and because of lack of in-person services over the last 18 months, this area for Hope City has grown exponentially less than it had in previous years, because we just didn't have a lot of first-time visitors that were able to be here for the last 18 months, right? But the question that you ask is, okay, do I believe in this place? Do I like this place? Does this place feel like home? And this is a huge step of generosity, because to give for the first time is a declaration of belonging. It's a declaration that I want to be a part of what this church is about, right? And so for someone to take this step, it's a spiritual step, but it's also a step of trust. It's a step of faith in the actual organization. The next step of generosity is moving from a rookie giver to a reoccurring giver. And this basically says, okay, what can I afford to give? I've not just given one time, I'm not just given $20, or I'm not just given, $5 a month, or, whenever I think about it. Now I want to prioritize my giving because I believe in this place and I want to help the mission of this place move forward. I want to automate, I want to prioritize, I want to set ahead of time my generosity toward this church. And a reoccurring giver, quite honestly, over the last 18 months, if we had several people move from rookie givers at the beginning of the pandemic to reoccurring givers, and without that, we would not be here today. Like, your choice to move from being a rookie giver to a reoccurring giver, it helped us so much in the predictability of our resources, when resources are coming in, how much can we count on, having each and every week, each and every month for ministry purposes. Like, that was so pivotal and so amazing for many of you to take that step of faith and to grow in your generosity to become a reoccurring giver. The next stage of generosity is moving from a reoccurring giver to what we call a relational giver. Now, every aspect of this giving continuum is spiritual, right? Like, if you're deciding to give back to God as a rookie giver, and it's sporadic, and it's the first time, or it's maybe the first time you've ever been generous toward a church, that's a big deal. I don't want to minimize that. And if you're a reoccurring giver, that's a spiritual decision as well. But I think these two stages, more than being a spiritual decision, most of the time they're a financial decision. The questions that we ask in these two stages are, how much can I afford to give? Right? Like, what is my bottom line? What's my budget look like? What do I have to give up in order to give? If I'm going to give $20 this week, what am I not going to get next week? Like, it's a calculation that we're making. When you become a relational giver, you move from this financial decision, it becomes a spiritual decision. And the question that you start asking yourself is not how much can I afford to give, or do I like this place enough to give? The question you ask yourself is, what is God asking me to give? Like, the generosity that you start to possess, it's not based on obligation. It's not based on guilt. It's not based on what your parents said you should do when you were a kid. It's based on your relationship with God, and it's not out of obligation. It's out of an overflow of your heart, out of the relationship that you have with God. And, there's a biblical mandate of 10%. And so many people in the relational category of giving, even if they don't give 10%, there's a percentage that they set aside out of a relationship with God to give back to Him. Not because they feel like they have to, but because they want to. It's more about their spiritual life than it is about their financial life. It's not based on the bottom dollar. It's based on all the faithfulness that God has shown them in the past and knowing that He's going to be faithful in the future. The next category of giving is what we call radical giving. And these people, they've given one time, then they set up reoccurring giving, and then they became a relational giver, and they're giving 10%. But then there's a group of people that give radically. They give over and above that 10% to further the kingdom of God on this earth. And it's not just through the local church. And I think one of the things that we've assumed in modern Christianity and American Christianity is that radical givers are also high net worth individuals. But some of the most radical givers are some of the least rich people that I know. I've known people who have given more, if you compare it from a ratio standpoint, than people who are, you don't have to be, you can be rich and not generous, right? You don't have to be rich to be a radical giver. You can be a radical giver and not have much at all, because radical giving isn't based on your net worth. It's based on your belief in what God wants to do through you in this world to accomplish His mission. And there's a group of radical givers that have, quite honestly, set the tone and set the pace for our church and allowed us to make the moves that we've made over the last 5 years. When we started Hope City, we had a number of churches because Trish and I traveled and spoke at so many churches and invested in marriages over the previous 10 years. We had a number of churches that wanted to be a part of helping Hope City get started. And so we were able to buy really nice equipment. We were able to provide really nice signage. We had a really great branding strategy based on the generosity of people outside of Hope City. Well, then when we launched Hope City, that support, that investment moved from people from outside the church to people inside the church. And obviously everybody's new, and so it took a little while to get there, but eventually about a year in, we were self-sufficient. We were able to, pay our bills with people that were giving inside the church. And I remember staying on a stage a year into our church, and we were running the Ritz-Charles, and it just was not working out well. We would show up and they'd be like, hey, you don't have your children's area today. And so then the next week we'd show up and, hey, next Sunday you have to go to the middle school because we double booked this place. So we were moving back and forth, and it was just a nightmare. And we found this location on Main Street, and it was going to be twice as much as we were paying in rent at the Ritz-Charles. And not only that, we would have to raise a ton of money, like $50,000 in like 7 days in order to get the down payment or the first and last month's rent and the security deposit and all this stuff. And a group of people stepped up and gave $50,000 in like 6 days. Just this radical display of generosity. When we moved into this place 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years ago in December, the week between Christmas and New Year's, we had a group of people that gave radically. It wasn't financially. They gave up an entire Sunday, the Sunday between Christmas and New Year's. We had an army of volunteers show up at our old building, pack like 4 moving trucks, and we moved everything out of that church and into this church in one day. See, generosity isn't just about your checkbook. It's not just about your money. It's about your heart, the posture of your heart. It's this belief that God is going to show up radically as I give back to Him in radical ways. And the question that radical givers ask is, how big of a difference can I make as I give? There's a progression to our generosity. It's in every aspect of our life. And here's what I love about our church. We have a group of people here that they're not necessarily even sure about Christianity yet, and yet they're generous. We have people that are in all stages of their spiritual development. We have people here that are Christians, but they're really kind of leery about the church, and so they're giving God and they're giving the church another chance, and they're still generous. We have a group of people that are so strong in their faith, and they give in a reoccurring way. We have people who love God and they love the mission of Hope City, and they give in a radical way. And so we don't have to all give in the same way. We don't have to all have this cookie cutter faith in order to contribute to the mission that God has for us as a church. And one of my hopes for this series, as we go through the series over the next few weeks, is not that you would go from a rookie giver to a radical giver. That would be phenomenal. If you want to run and skip all these steps, that's phenomenal, all right? I'm not going to stop you. But here's my goal. My goal isn't that you would go from rookie giver to radical giver. My goal would be that you would just take one step. One step in your trust in God. One step in your generosity. One step in your contribution to our church family. I want to look at this passage of Scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And there's 5 verses here that we're going to read together. And it says this: remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop. But the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. Now, you can take Jesus out of this. You can take the church out of this. You can take all of your history of church and finances out of this. This is not a biblical principle. This is an agricultural principle. What's Paul saying here? He's saying, hey, here's the fact. You plant with a little amount of seed, you're going to get a small crop. You plant with a lot of seeds, you have the greatest chance of getting a large harvest. All right, so this isn't rocket science, it's actually just science, all right? It's just you plant a little seeds, you're going to get a small crop. Plant a lot of seeds, you're going to get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure. I love this. I don't think the American church has taken this verse very seriously over the last 50 years. Because there's been so many pastors who've manipulated people and guilt-tripped people and beat people down and browbeat people about their generosity. And what's Paul saying? He's saying, hey, this is an overflow. This is an indication of an overflow of your relationship with God. And so don't give compulsively. Don't give out of pressure. Don't give because you feel guilt. You must decide in your heart how much to give. Now, there's a biblical model of giving that is based on 10% all throughout the Old Testament that carries over into the New Testament. Some people say, hey, this verse nullifies that. I don't think it does. But what it does say is it is a personal decision that you make in your relationship with God. Because why? God loves a person who gives cheerfully. And God will generously provide all that you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. As the scriptures say, they share freely and give generously to the poor. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. This generous God who supplies abundant seed for the farmer, which becomes bread for our meals, is even more extravagant toward you. First, he supplies every need plus more. Then he multiplies the seed as you sow it, so that the harvest of your generosity will grow. You will be abundantly enriched in every way as you give generously on every occasion. For when we take your gifts to those in need, it causes many to give thanks to God. So I want to talk about two perspectives of giving today, because I think many of us have this competing force in our hearts. I think if I sat down with a cup of coffee with you and I said, hey, do you want to be a generous person? I don't think anybody would say, no, I want to be a greedy jerk. No, I just want to be greedy. Like, my goal in life is to just be greedy. I just want as much for myself as possible, right? No, I think we all want to be generous. But I think there's this competing attitude and disposition that we all fight against in varying degrees. And the first perspective is, I own it all. I own it all. Like, everything that I have is mine. Now, I was thinking about this morning because I think if you and I sat down and we had a conversation and I said, hey, who owns everything in your life? I think if you were a follower of Christ, you'd say, oh, well, God owns it all. You know, God is the author of life. God is the giver of all good things. God owns everything in my life. I owe everything to God. I think we know that. I don't know that we live that. Like, all of us know that 465, the speed limit on 465 is 55 miles an hour, right? We all know that. We're not going 55 miles an hour in 65. If you are, you're getting run over and honked at, right? Like, I was coming here today, I was going 80. Like, I was running late. And so we know the speed limit on 465 is 55, but it doesn't feel that way. Why? Because there's 6 lanes, right? And so we don't drive 55 on 465, even though we know it. And you can know that God is the author of everything. You can know that God owns it all. You can know that everything you have is a gift from God. It does not mean that you live that way. This is not about what you know to be true about God. This is about how you live. And for many of us, we live as though we own it all. And you know what we think? When I own it all, I create my own success. I work hard. I show up early. I stay late. I close deals. I make it happen. I am the author of my own success. It is all on me. Right? Some of us take that to varying degrees in our life. And for some of us, it drives us. For some of us, it makes us miserable. For some of us, it makes us lose sleep at night because we feel like if I own it all, then I have to create my own success. Why do we think that? Because the more I have, the more I acquire, then the more successful or happy or influential or valuable or significant I will be. Right? The more I have, the more successful I will be, the more influential I'll be, the more valuable I will be, the more important I will be. And so we don't say yes to things because they make us happy. We say yes to things because we think they make us valuable. Right? And so we're constantly working or constantly trying to acquire, not necessarily even to prove anything to ourselves, but to prove to other people just how significant we are. Another aspect of I own it all is what I acquire is a reflection of my ability. And so this drives the house that we live in, this drives the cars that we drive, this drives the subdivision that we want to get into or the schools we want our kids to go to. This drives the tax bracket that we want to be in someday. This drives the vacations that we go on. All this stuff. What I acquire is a reflection of how talented and gifted and successful I am. And if you think that you own it all, then you don't give out of a relationship. You give out of guilt or obligation. You give because God says to. You give because you don't want God to be disappointed in you. You give because you don't want God's blessing to be turned off in your life. There's another way to do life. And that's to change that perspective. And not just in word, but in deed, in action. And to start living as though not that I own it all, but that God owns it all. We don't need more knowledge about generosity, right? You probably know all that you need to know about being generous. What we need is transformation. Somehow we need to flip the script and start to live as though God owns it all. Look what 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7 says. But what do you have that God hasn't given you? And if everything you have is from God, why boast as though it were not a gift? Paul's saying, hey, everything that you have is from God. The talent, the gifts, the ability, the drive for success, the opportunities, the experiences, all of it, that's from God. So why are you acting as though you own it? That it's not a gift? Back in June, Trish and I sold our house. The market was super hot at that time. I don't think it is as hot. It's still pretty competitive, but it was like multiple offers over asking price. We listed our house. We sold it in a weekend. We got, I think, $22,000 over asking. We made on our house. We had lived there for 6 years. We had remodeled the whole house. We redid the kitchen. We redid the basement. We put new carpet all in the upstairs. We put hardwood floors all throughout the downstairs. We upgraded the whole kitchen. We had black stainless steel appliance. It was just an amazing transformation of our house. And so we put it on the market. We made more in the sale of our house than we made all of last year collectively combined income. It was like this huge financial windfall. And our plan at the time was to move into a rental and then build. And now we're on this. We live on 3 acres. There's like this barn, this cornfield in the back of our house. We're renting this house, and now Trish is like, I don't know if I want to build anymore. I think I just want to live on a farm. I'm like, we live a mile from downtown Zionsville. We're not on a farm, all right? We have 3 acres. We're not on a farm. But city girl, she thinks she's on a farm. I'm from Crawfordsville. I know what a farm is, all right? And so we sit down and we start talking about what we want to do with this money. And Trish is like, well, before we even start talking about, what we're going to do and how much we're going to put toward our other house, we got to give 10% of this to God. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, we're going to tithe on this money. I said, what do you mean tithe? She's like, 10%. I'm like, I know what tithe means. I don't need you to break down the Greek for me. I'm like, what we got to tithe for? She's like, you're kidding me, right? I'm like, well, I wasn't kidding, but maybe I am kidding. No, I'm not kidding. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Let's break down these numbers. I said, when we bought the house, we put $20,000 down. So that's not really profit, okay? So let's deduct that, and then we put X amount of dollars into the kitchen. Well, let's deduct that. We put X amount of dollars into the basement. Let's deduct that. Put X amount of dollars into the hardwood floors. We'll deduct that. We put X amount of dollars into the roof. Let's deduct that. We put X amount of dollars into the new carpet before we sold the house. Let's deduct that. I said, so then we can tithe on the actual profit. And I said, and by the way, when we were paying our mortgage on 90%. All right, so we'd already tithe, so it was post-tithe money that we had paid the mortgage on. So do we really need to double dip and tithe again on that money? So let's deduct all the money that we had tithed on for the last 6 years, and then we can give. And she's like, give me the checkbook, all right? I'm writing the check. You have no say in this. And she's like, Justin, God owns it all. Why are you nickeling and diming him? Why are you going through this? And it was this moment where, like, this wasn't about dollars and cents. This was about the condition of my heart. Like, God has blessed me so much in seasons of unfaithfulness, in seasons of making poor financial decisions, in seasons of not following him the best of my ability. God has blessed me so much. Why was I negotiating with him? Because I didn't think he owned it all. I didn't think he could be trusted. Even though we had just made more money than we ever thought possible on the sale of our house, I thought I owned it. Secondly, if you think God owns it all, then we manage what God entrusts to us. We're just called to be managers. Matthew 25, verse 14 through 18 says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, and to another 2 bags, to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more bags. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now, the truth is that God entrusts to us different amounts of money, different amounts of gifts, different amounts of experiences, different amounts of influence. We all have different amounts, right? You can look across all cultures at all times. Life is not fair. We're each given different gifts in different amounts. We aren't in control of how much we have. We're responsible for how well we manage what is given to us. And so God has entrusted you with time and resources and gifts, and you are called to do your best to manage what He has given you, to help others. As a church family, we're entrusted with the resources that you give to help manage and to help move the mission of Hope City forward. And we take that responsibility very seriously. I want to take a few minutes and I want to walk back through 2020 and bring you up to speed on the first 10 months of 2021 and how our giving and how the resources have been managed and allocated. Our total giving for 2020 was $459,588, which is phenomenal. Pandemic year, you guys came through in some really big ways. Our Give Hope in 2020, which is our year-end giving campaign that'll start the first week of December, was $102,000. So that is included in that $459,000. December giving, including the $102,000, was $134,000. So going into December, our total giving was right around $320,000, which was not up to budget. And so we went into December operating in about a $30,000 deficit. And so the first funds of the Give Hope campaign were to make up that deficit that we had in our giving. We allocated money to Urban Act. We allocated money to a building fund. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But we needed that money, that December money, to make up what hadn't been given the previous 11 months. And that had been the case for the last 3 years. That's how we had operated the last 3 years. We were always counting on December to make up for what wasn't given throughout the year. And it was a stressful way to live, it was an unhealthy way to live, and it was not managing the resources that God has entrusted to us well. And so our board made a decision going into 2021, we are going to get our budget in line with what is being given and not what we hope comes in December. And so to the best of our ability, we forecasted that, we projected that. We had PPP money that helped us make up any deficits that we had in the first few months of 2021. And so 2021 comes, and we have 107 unique givers so far this year. Now, this was about 80 in 2020, so this is up 27 people over the last year. We average about 80 reoccurring givers. So if you go from rookie to reoccurring, we have about 80 givers, every 80 families that give on a reoccurring basis every month. Our initial budget going into 2020, because of where we ended that year, we dropped it down. It was about $480,000 of 2020 was our budget. We dropped it down to $432,000, and that was about $36,000 per month is what we felt like we needed. Okay? Now, in July, we began to realize that the PPP money had ran out, and our giving had not grown at the rate that we thought it was going to grow. Our average monthly giving wasn't $36,000 a month, it was $30,000 a month. And so we said, hey, we have got to go back and we have to evaluate every single line item in this budget, and we have to dial back our spending. We had just come out of the PPP money that was kind of carrying us, and we had money set aside in a building fund that we did not want to have to go into December in a deficit. We wanted to go into December with that money not touched in savings. And so that was our desire. And so we go through all of our fixed expenses, and we come to this number of $29,000 is the amount of fixed expenses that we have got to get to. And so we have two kind of emergency meetings, one week of July, the next week of July, and by the second meeting, we cannot get that number under $34,000 of fixed expenses, which is a problem because our average giving is $30,000. And so Trish and I made the decision at that point to eliminate her salary. And she gets a monthly stipend now. And so since July, she has not been paid her salary. But it has gotten our expenses down to that number. We've had to dip into the building fund some, but by the end of this year, we'll have almost $40,000 in our building fund as we go into December, and we won't have to use our Give Hope money to make up for what we haven't had given. So our revised monthly budget is $32,000, and that is $29,000 of fixed expenses and $3,000 to cover everything that's not fixed each month. Now, that's the good news is we're going to go into Give Hope, hopefully using the operational money of Give Hope not to make up our budget deficit, but to really do some really cool things and move into a new facility in 2022. But if we are not hitting that $32,000 per month number by January of 2022, we're going to have a different conversation because Tricia was able to eliminate her salary, but our fixed expenses are $29,000 right now. Our hope was that by this fall, our giving would grow and we could reinstate her salary by the end of the year, but our giving would need to go up about $4,000 a month for that to happen. So I say all that to say, we're not managing the resources that you give to a budget. We're managing the resources that we spend to what is given. And sometimes that isn't fun. And that's the family meeting part of this, right? It's what's really not fun for me in that respect. But I wanted to be honest with you. But here's what I know. I've seen God come through in some incredible ways in the life of our church. And I know when I give, I become a part of something bigger than myself. And that's the whole joy of being a part of a family. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 10 says, "First he supplies every need, plus more. Then he multiplies the seed as you sow it, so that the harvest of your generosity will grow." And that's the amazing thing about God. He multiplies the seed of our generosity collectively. See, generosity isn't just about now. It's not just about what we're doing now. It's not just about 2021 numbers. Being generous is about investing in eternity. It's about partnering with God on a mission that is bigger than yourself. See, God doesn't need us, but he chooses to use us to transform lives for all of eternity together. And so for the last 3 years, we've taken 2 Sundays in November to provide Thanksgiving baskets for Urban Act Academy. And it's been an unbelievable experience. This year, we're going to provide about 190 Thanksgiving baskets for every family at Urban Act. You guys come through every single year. For those of you that don't know, Urban Act is a charter school in downtown Indianapolis, and we've partnered with them on several initiatives over the last few years. The baskets are in the back of the auditorium, and I think with COVID last year, there was like this anomaly that took place because people took baskets, and then they brought back baskets with food that wasn't on the list, and then what we had to do, we had to take out all of that food, and then we had to go buy food that was actually on the list, because we want every basket to look alike. And so if you take a basket, buy what's on the list, there's a $25 gift card involved in that. For about $40, you can provide Thanksgiving meal. So it's $25 for a gift card and about $15 of food. We had about 16 baskets last year that came back without a gift card. So on the day of delivery, we're out buying $400 worth of gift cards. We're going and basically cleaning out Kroger's all over the place, getting gift cards for turkeys. And so if you're going to go ham on that, no pun intended, if you're going to go ham on those gift baskets, make sure just if you take a basket, bring it back with the food that's there. And we're going to deliver those in 2 weeks, and we're going to bless so many people. And that's the joy of being a part of the family of God. Right? Like our giving is way bigger than us. What we bring, what I could do individually, I could do a couple baskets individually, but collectively, we're going to provide for a whole school. That's what God does through generosity. He multiplies what you give, but what you give to God, he multiplies. Right? That's the joy of generosity. And as a family, generosity isn't the most fun thing to talk about. But growing in generosity as a family is essential for us being a healthy family. See, generosity is less about our money. It's more about our heart. And as you can tell this morning, I had some distance I needed to go in generosity this summer, and God used my wife, God bless her, to take me there. And I'm hoping that God uses the next few weeks for us as a church family to grow us in our perspective of giving. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much that you go before us and you provide for our needs, that you involve us in the process of generosity, not It's not based on our net worth. It's based on our relationship with you. And God, for those of us that are just exploring this idea of generosity, we're rookie givers, we're going to celebrate them. Celebrate that step. For those of us that are feeling prompted to move from a rookie giver to a reoccurring giver, we're going to celebrate that. For those that are reoccurring, that are feeling prompted to move into a relational giving relationship with you, we're going to celebrate that. And for those that want to be radical givers, we're going to celebrate that because all of it matters to you. It all carries eternal significance. So God, we collectively bring you our offering of not just our money, but our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen.